Welcome to the deep dive.
Okay, so the source material we're working with today it's all over the place. It jumps from uh, human biology to global politics to the philosophy of death. It's basically the definition of an unfiltered conversation.
It really is. We've got a stack of sources here that you really need a framework for. So our mission for you listening is to kind of step back, build that structure, and pull out the key insights from this flood of information.
Yeah, we're going to try and connect some dots that you probably didn't even realize were on the same page.
Exactly.
And we're jumping right in with a piece of hard science that kind of lays the groundwork for a lot of what comes later. Let's talk about finger length ratios.
Specifically, the right hand. It's the ratio between the ring finger and the pointer finger, sometimes called the 2D.4D ratio. And this isn't, some kind of pseudoscience.
Right.
It's a pretty reliable indicator that's been replicated in a bunch of studies, and it links back to prenatal testosterone exposure. So if you look at a typical male hand, the ring finger is usually a little bit longer than the pointer finger. And that difference comes from how much testosterone the fetus was exposed to in the womb.
Correct. And what's fascinating, what the sources pointed out, was a specific finding about sexual orientation. Researchers found that men who identify as gay often have a much more pronounced difference.
A longer ring finger, even more so than the average heterosexual male.
Exactly. The sources called it a hypermale pattern.
Okay, so I have to ask, is this presented as like absolute causation, or is it a strong correlation?
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty big distinction.
That's a great question. And no, it's presented as a strong correlation. It's tied to the hormonal environment during development, not, a perfect behavioral predictor or anything like that. But it suggests some biological predispositions are set really early.
Which sets the stage perfectly for conscious strategy, right? Which is where the sources go next.
Right, because after you establish that biological lottery, we get this incredibly candid and intentional strategy for choosing a partner.
Yeah, and the main goal was super specific.
Hyper-specific. Dating only athletic women. The whole idea was about genetic optimization.
To give your kids a head start, basically.
Yep.
A foundation of athletic ability.
And the source was pretty dismissive of women who are just, focused on their social media presence, just not compatible with the goal.
But that was the high-minded biological goal. The sources also detailed this other strategy that was a lot more pragmatic.
It was about dating women who already have kids.
And the logic for that.
It was very, very explicit. He claimed that women without children, and I'm quoting here, never have food at home.
They always want to go out to eat, which is, expensive and time-consuming.
Exactly. But if you date a woman with kids...
You hit the jackpot. You can wake up at 3:30 in the morning, go to the kitchen, and there's a cold Capri Sun and a Lunchable just waiting for you.
And that right there is the real incentive. It's this powerful, practical thing that kind of overrides everything else.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It shows how these, primal needs just interact with these super conscious long-term strategies.
And it's a perfect contrast to what comes next, which is when society tries to impose these artificial boundaries with legislation.
Exactly. We jump from this deep cultural taboo, incest, highlighted by that funny anecdote about getting a first cousin pregnant and being warned you'll be raising a dang lizard.
Right.
To a proposed law that tries to regulate the absolute earliest stage of reproduction.
This is that proposed Ohio law. The sources called it the Conception Begins at Erection Act.
Which is a title.
It is, and the bill would criminalize ejaculation if there's no intent to conceive. We're talking a potential $10,000 fine for discharge.
Because it's logically absurd. How would you ever prove someone's intent in a court of law? You're policing a thought.
That's precisely the point the sources raised. You'd have to prove a negative intention. It creates this impossible legal framework, which is a perfect segue into the messy reality of policing sex work.
Right. So we got this deep dive into sting operations, specifically from a detective, Johnston, who would go undercover, posing as a prostitute.
And the process was, it was rigorous. He put ads online on sites like Backpage back in the day, and then set up these rapid-fire dates, sometimes one every half an hour, from a hotel room.
But the key part was establishing probable cause before the guy even showed up. How did they do that?
It was all on the phone. The whole thing relied on coded language and getting an explicit verbal agreement. Probable cause was set the moment the client called and agreed to pay for a specific sex act.
Even if they were using acronyms to kind of hide it.
Especially then. I mean, this is where the lingo becomes really important. The sources gave a couple of examples.
GFE was one, right?
Yeah, GFE for girlfriend experience, which meant kissing was included. And then there was the term Russian, which was for a specific sex act. We're just recording what was documented, but it shows how quickly this, transactional marketplace develops its own vocabulary.
And that documentation of crime in the physical world takes us right into the digital frontier, which often feels like this, lawless space. The sources picked up on a lot of anxiety around AI.
Oh, yeah. That anxiety was captured perfectly in this one story from a user who gave the GPT-5 model this incredibly complex question.
And it just answered it flawlessly.
Flawlessly. And for the user, it created this moment of, awe and total dread. The moment they realize, oh, this is here, it's real.
And the fear that follows is, okay, if AI is already acting as a companion for friendship or romance or whatever, is it just going to create the same addictive dopamine loops as social media?
That's the concern, isn't it? These things are optimized for engagement. They could easily trigger those same negative dopamine hits we see from endless scrolling, but maybe even more effectively because they're so tailored to you.
That anxiety just gets compounded when you look at the sheer volume of unfiltered content out there, specifically on a platform like Pornhub.
The statistic the sources used it's just staggering. The amount of video uploaded to that one site in a single year would take one person 169 years to watch, nonstop.
169 years for 1 year of uploads.
Yeah, and the core ethical failure, according to the sources, is the total lack of accountability. You just need an email to upload. There's no age verification, no identity check, no consent verification.
Which is why the sources just flat out call the platform a functioning crime scene.
Because it's infested with real sexual crimes. And once that content is there, the algorithm just takes over. That's what creates the hellhole of rape, as the source put it.
So if you watch one piece of exploitative content,
the algorithm assumes you liked it, and it just sends you further down that rabbit hole. Which brings us to this fundamental shift in how human identity and reward systems even work anymore.
Right, because historically the biggest dopamine hit you got was from doing the thing, climbing the mountain, scoring the goal, the moment itself.
Then for a while it shifted to, recording the moment, taking the picture.
But now, the biggest dopamine hit science can measure comes from the moment you press the share button.
It creates this feeling of living in third person. Your identity isn't defined by the experience anymore. It's defined by the reaction to the experience. The biggest reward is just asking, so what did you think of what I did?
And that whole shift from an internal identity to an external one, it connects perfectly to our next segment on political systems. The internal conflict of a person starts to mirror the internal conflict of the nation.
Yeah, the sources really highlight this massive contradiction that a lot of Americans feel. You value the safety, the security blanket of being in the U.S.
But at the same time, you recognize that the nation is doing a lot of messed up stuff around the world.
And the critique we saw it was brutal. It described America not as a republic, but as 50 corporations in a trench suit.
A structure that's just designed to extract tax revenue and then funnel it back to those same corporations through subsidies.
And for a specific example of that, the sources pointed right at lobbying laws.
This was a huge, and I mean a really contentious claim in the source material. It said that Israel is the only country that can lobby the U.S. Congress without registering as a foreign agent under FAIR Allow.
Right. And FAIR-LEZ is the Foreign Agents Registration Act. It's designed for transparency so that we know who is trying to influence our policy.
So the source argues that by giving this alleged exemption, you're removing that transparency.
And they tie it back to history, claiming that right before his assassination, JFK was actively fighting AIPAC on this very issue, arguing they needed to register.
So the core critique here is that this alleged system allows a foreign state to have this kind of outsized influence on U.S. policy, bypassing the very laws meant to prevent that.
Exactly. The sources concluded that lobbying in general should just be disallowed, period, for any country.
Okay, so moving from that policy critique to the human reality of it, the conversation shifted to the Israel-Palestine conflict, specifically what's happening in Gaza right now.
And we have to be clear, we are reporting on the first-hand accounts from the sources here. The host made a very direct statement saying he believes he is watching a genocide unfold.
Yeah, and the sources included these harrowing accounts from doctors at Nazar Hospital who were treating what they called intense kid trauma We're talking infants with just massive injuries.
The descriptions of Moesi camp were just as stark. It's this huge tent city where about a third of Gaza's population is now living.
20 family members sharing a single tent.
Yeah, trying to live some kind of normal life under these just unimaginable conditions.
And this external conflict brings us right back to the idea of internal conflict. Abraham Lincoln warned about this when he was just a young lawyer.
Right. He asked if some, transatlantic giant would come and crush America.
And his answer is still so relevant. He said, never.
If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher.
We'll live forever or die by suicide. The threat is internal. It's us.
Which transitions perfectly to our domestic challenges, right? To this will gap in manufacturing.
Right. The numbers are pretty stark. There are 482,000 open manufacturing jobs right now.
And if reshoring efforts actually work, we could need another 2 to 3 million workers. But the problem isn't just a skills gap.
No, it's a will gap. There's no enthusiasm for the work. And the sources argue that's because we took shop class out of high schools and told everyone they had to get a 4-year degree.
We created this cultural bias against vocational work.
The struggle to commit to a tangible future. It connects to an even deeper struggle, doesn't it? Confronting our own mortality.
It does. The sources explored this through neuroscience, citing a professor who was diagnosed with terminal cancer.
And the insight is that the brain is a prediction machine. That's its whole job, to predict the immediate future so we survive.
But because it's wired that way, it finds it almost impossible to truly, deeply engage with the idea of its own non-existence. It's not built for that.
It's a brain bug.
Yeah.
And that bug, according to the source, is why almost every single religion on Earth has an afterlife or reincarnation story.
It's a cognitive solution to a biological problem, If your brain is hardwired to believe in tomorrow, you need a story to explain the one tomorrow that isn't coming.
Interestingly, the sources did note Judaism as an exception, with its focus being so much more on action in the here and now.
Right. Which brings us finally to this idea of grace and self-improvement through baby steps.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect counter-narrative to all that external validation stuff.
Yeah, the host talked about his own self-criticism, setting these diabolical and ridiculous goals, like deciding to run a few feet and expecting to be at the Olympic trials.
And then the fall from that height is just devastating.
So the lesson is self-compassion. If you walk into the gym and just walk right back out, you still showed up. That counts.
Yeah. The goal shouldn't be some unrealistic body you saw online. It should be a bedroom body, something achievable. Give yourself the grace of taking that tiny first step.
That idea of achieving over an obstruction is so key. The sources said that with grief, the pain doesn't necessarily get better.
No, you don't get used to it. Instead, by enduring it, you achieve over an obstruction. And in that endurance, you win, just by surviving and growing.
And defining what winning means for yourself internally. That brings us back to our final thought for you, the learner.
So we've established that our biology, our brains, are prediction machines. They're hardwired for the near term, which gives rise to our deepest beliefs about the afterlife.
But if our modern identity is now defined by that external dopamine hit, by the share button, by living in the third person, are we losing the ability to define success for ourselves in the moment when no one is watching?
If the brain can only be satisfied by external applause, what part of the human experience is actually safe from that? How do you find meaning when the phone is off? Something to think about.
That's our deep dive for today. We'll see you next time.